Welcome to A Look Inside. I'm your host, Demetria Head, and today's special guest is author of I Chose Love, Sandi Gold. Welcome, Sandi.
Thank you so much.
So let's talk about your book, I Chose Love. I enjoyed reading it and it resonated with me. So why don't you tell our listening audience what inspired you to share your story with the public and to decide that you definitely had to bring it to the masses?
My background is not as a writer at all, but I was working as an artist when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor and told I had less than a year to live. I was diagnosed by five different neurologists and told that. And the very first time I was sent to a hospital to be tested, not one person would even talk to me, even mention the brain tumor. They would just smile and take tests. And of course, they knew what they were making tests for, but nobody would
Mhm,
say anything to me. And nobody even suggested I go to a social worker. I was just checked out of the hospital. And I
mhm,
remember just sitting at home, just thinking, how do they know I'm not going to commit suicide? They don't know anything. And it
mhm.
was a horrible way, I thought, to treat somebody, particularly somebody who'd just been told they were going to die within a year.
Yeah.
So I knew I had to write this and let people know what my experience was, just to let them forewarn them. I didn't want people to have to go through what I went through, even from the very get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a terrible way to experience what you went through. Why do you think that they just weren't saying anything?
I have thought about that. And I don't know whether it was for insurance reasons,
Hmm.
perhaps if they said the wrong thing and then I did,
Oh,
or just a discomfort, that's not part of my
hmm.
job kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I don't know why I wasn't assigned a social worker, which would have made
Hmm.
perfect sense. You know,
Yeah.
that somebody just dropped the ball.
Hmm.
I go through my book, all the different ideas that I have
Hmm. Hmm.
as to why that, but nothing really made sense to me. So I
Right.
really don't know.
Right. Okay, well, I Chose Love deals with some incredibly personal, obviously personal and painful experiences. So, what was the most challenging part of revisiting and writing about these moments, if at all?
The most challenging part was writing about my family and how they reacted to it. Not only because it was so painful when I went
Mhm,
through it for the number of years that I went through it, but also because I love my family and I didn't
right.
want to say negative things about them, but it was such a
Hmm.
part of my story. And so I really had to juggle, figure out the best way to approach that in the most loving and respectful way.
Hmm. Okay, did you have any support system at all?
From friends and from facilitators, people that were in
Hmm.
the holistic field, would
Okay.
hear about my story and would
Hmm.
literally call me or just they'd meet me and they'd say, I'll do anything I can for you. So yes, I did in that way, um, but not from my immediate family, no,
Right.
which was
Okay.
extremely painful since I was a poor artist and a single woman.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, yeah, I just feel for you. I mean, there were parts of the book where I just, it was so emotional for me because I can only imagine, being that I've had to be on the other end, on the outside looking in at family who went through that. So I can imagine how painful and how difficult that is. I mean, that was emotional for me.
What was
So,
most
mhm,
painful thing was not
mhm,
understanding why they were acting the way they were. And I
right.
spent years trying to figure that out. And once I understood, I actually felt compassion for them because they were
Okay.
so scared and they didn't know how to handle
Yeah.
their emotions. And that's a
Yeah.
scary place for them to be.
Hmm. Well, I can, yeah. Well, I can see that, since you said that, it makes it a bit more, it does make it a bit more understanding, at the same time, while you're going through it, you know.
Mm.
you're trying to understand it and you're looking for all the whys. I guess it's painful on both ends,
Oh,
really, or difficult on both ends.
for everybody, yes. And I couldn't
Absolutely.
imagine even being so scared that you
Hmm.
cannot offer a loved family member. And I was a loved family member. I know that.
Hmm.
I know
Hmm.
that you cannot extend yourself to a loved family member. That's really scared. I mean, that's
Hmm.
really beside yourself that you cannot
Hmm.
extend yourself. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's scary when I think about that. I shudder when I think
Hmm.
about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel you. So the theme of choosing love as a healing force is central to your book. So can you talk about a specific moment where choosing love made the biggest difference in the specific journey?
I thought you were going to ask me how did I choose love? But yes,
Well,
absolutely.
you
And
can answer
again,
that too.
because that is sort of an interesting story.
Hmm.
Perhaps I should I'll answer that question and then, but make sure I answer the second part, please.
Okay.
Um, it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I was diagnosed. I was home alone, maybe a month later. I mean, I did not cry when any of the doctors told me I was going to die, which I'm not saying is a wonderful thing, but I think because I was brought up with parents who were not emotionally available, I had
Hmm.
to I had to count on myself right from the get-go. And so I
Hmm.
couldn't even give myself a moment to cry. I think I just had to get into fifth gear kind of thing and just focus on what I was going to do. So it wasn't until I was about a month after I had been diagnosed that I was home alone when all of a sudden the feelings started erupting. It took about a month and it was scary, to all of a sudden start feeling that fear. It was that feeling of the Wile E. Coyote while is falling off the cliff, and all of a sudden he pumps those
Hmm.
tiny little legs of his, like
Yes.
back up.
Yes.
It was that same feeling but instead of, pumping my little skinny little legs, I
Hmm.
had to focus. I had to really focus on getting myself back, or I was going to trip out. And what I focused on was the artwork that I had done for the year before, my artwork. What was I leaving to this world? Kind of
Hmm.
thing. And the pieces of artwork that I had done were a portrait of my grandmother who had died of a brain tumor, a woman
Wow.
holding onto a grave, a um, a dead fish hanging upside down by a rope tied to its tail, and a
Okay.
and a bouquet of dead carnations. And when I realized that, I really freaked out because
Hmm.
I realized death had been following me for a year through my artwork. And that was the scariest moment I think I've ever experienced in my life when I realized, oh my gosh.
Yes.
But I also realized at the same time that, well, then there had to be a higher power of some kind.
Hmm.
Something looking over me, something, guiding me, something there
Hmm.
greater than myself.
Right.
And I wanted to get as close to that God,
Hmm.
source, energy, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to get as close as I possibly could. And the only way I knew that was through love. And that at that moment is when I chose to use love to guide me. Now, there was a second part to that question. What was the second part?
I was asking what was a specific moment where choosing love made the biggest difference in your journey?
In My first thought was my family. The second thought was the doctors. And the third thought was me. Not being ashamed when I was scared.
Hmm.
Just treating myself in as loving way and with as much compassion as possible. And treating my doctors with as much love and compassion and understanding when they were trying to strong arm me into doing things I knew weren't healthy for me. In the very beginning, of course, I used to try to explain who I was. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, most of the doctors that I saw had their own agenda and they didn't want to hear from this little blonde haired, 33-year-old. girl, kind of thing, which is how they were treating me. Like,
Mhm.
come on. They didn't want to hear it. And
Wow.
the same thing with my family. Every single time I tried to explain to them what I needed from them, that
Hmm.
scared them even more. I realized afterwards. And so I really had to open up my heart in all those each of those instances.
Yeah. Well, love is powerful.
Oh,
Love is definitely powerful. So, my next question is, how did facing a life-threatening brain tumor shape your outlook on life, both immediately and over the years?
if I could overcome that, I can overcome anything, is really how it's shaped me. I
Mhm.
gained more confidence, I mean, and strength than I ever thought possible. Ever thought possible. And to recognize that the strength is within us. It's
Yeah,
within us. And I mean, I definitely believe in God and a higher power, but that's within us.
yeah,
That's within.
absolutely. Absolutely. During your journey, did you at any point realize that you were a lot stronger than you thought?
No. And to be perfectly honest, no. Because I was scared skinny. I was despite what I did, I was still shaking in my
Mm-hmm.
boots.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think I learned through other people who reflected back on me, that I kept hearing the word courageous and I kept
Hmm.
just kind of shooing it off. I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
here, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Um, I I still find it kind of hard to accept, but I've heard it so much. And I I I I identify the most with it took courage to do what I did when I overcame the breast cancer because I
Hmm.
totally declined having a mastectomy that two
Hmm.
doctors were insisting that I have.
Yeah.
But by that time, I knew the language of my body, and every cell in my
Hmm.
body was screaming no.
Hmm.
I certainly would have had that mastectomy if I hadn't had the brain tumor years ago, but I had learned
Okay.
so much from that. And
Hmm.
by following my heart, by using a natural treatment, by
Hmm.
changing the soil in my body, so that the cancer couldn't grow in it. In
Hmm.
just 5 months, I was cancer free, and they wanted to cut off my breast.
Wow.
Which is another reason I wrote this book because I
Hmm.
want people to not do what I did. I'm not one to try to talk anybody into doing what I did because we're all individuals and our bodies
Yeah.
are different, right? But
Hmm.
I want people to recognize that they have options and that the
Oh,
strength is
yes.
within them and to teach them
Yes.
different ways on how to access that.
Absolutely. I think with your book and the things that you talk about, it will make people, because I mean, I know I've known quite a few people who've had brain tumors. I think that anyone else going through that, I think going forward, they'll be equipped. If they read your book, I think they'll definitely be equipped with more knowledge, you know, and it might lessen the fear and uncertainty that a lot of people have because now they're going in with knowing that, okay, these are the things you should expect and here are your options. So I think it would help, it would benefit a lot of people.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think so. Now you were talking about listening to your body and some things you weren't willing to do. So that leads me to my next question about how you stress the importance of listening to one's body. So, what are some practical ways you could recommend to people to begin doing in their own lives? And I know you touch on it in the book, but just for
Sure,
a listening
sure.
audience.
And I want to preface this by saying our bodies are forever talking to us. They
Hmm.
tell us when we need to turn the thermostat up or down so
Hmm.
that we're comfortable, when to get out of the sun,
Hmm.
when we're hungry, when we have to go to the bathroom, when we want or don't want sex. They're forever. It's not that big a jump to use it
Yes.
to help us medically. to
Mhm.
help us navigate through the medical field is what
Mhm.
I did. So how do you listen to one's body? I think we all do, as I said previous, and we all understand it when we listen to our intuition. And we know that when we don't listen to our intuition, oftentimes we regret it. So
Mhm.
it really is getting in touch with whatever it is telling us. And I think one easy way is to, when we're triggered, because we all get triggered, all
Yeah.
day long, we're triggered, it seems.
Yes.
And to rather than focusing outwardly on that person that triggered us,
Yes.
put that aside for a moment
Mhm.
and just realize that that person would not have triggered you unless there was a soft spot within us. When
Mhm.
there was
Mhm.
something, if somebody came up to me and told me I had purple hair, I wouldn't respond at all, right?
Right, right.
Because I think that was ridiculous. So
Mhm.
whenever we do respond to someone, it's because there's a little weak spot in us. And
Mhm.
we can use being triggered to strengthen ourselves, to
Mhm.
strengthen that little weak spot by feeling it and really dropping deep down and even just trying to recognize what it feels like, what size it is, how dense it is, what the temperature is, just doing all sorts of investigating. What is it I'm feeling? And even go so far as to say, to thank it for arising, because it's there to offer us precious information, and to get really silent while feeling that and ask it, is there something you'd like to tell me? Is there something I need to know? And just really listen. It
Mhm.
takes practice, but it gets easier and easier and easier. And it really just allows doors to open that otherwise you wouldn't have access to. And it's
Yeah,
personalized. It's not one size fits all. It's so
right.
personalized to us
Mhm.
all as individuals.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you faced multiple health challenges from a brain tumor to breast cancer. So, what role did resilience play in your journey, and how would you define resilience based on your journey?
Resilience is bouncing back after a challenge, is how I would define that. And again, while I was going through it, I wouldn't have defined my what I did as experiencing resilience because I it wasn't like I chose, well, I could go this way or I could go that way.
Mhm.
It wasn't like, I guess I could have stayed in the fear, but that really wasn't even a choice.
Yeah.
Something else I think it's really important to say is to feel that fear. Don't try to avoid any feelings. We were given all of our feelings for a reason.
Mhm.
We weren't created with them as a mistake. We
Mhm.
need to feel all of them, particularly the negative ones, the ones that scare us or the ones that don't feel well. Good. Because there's so much knowledge, there's so much information, and by avoiding our feelings, we are, what's the opposite of strengthening? Weakening ourselves when we
Mhm.
avoid our feelings. So that's another way to strengthen ourselves by feeling our feelings. Did I answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. And that is so true because one of the things that I've always had a habit of doing is, instead of facing those feelings head on, I would just shove them in the back of my mind,
Yes.
just to
Yeah.
keep on moving and pushing forward. And that can be detrimental.
But that's a natural
Find
reaction.
now. Yes.
Nobody wants to feel pain. Nobody,
Mhm.
it's a natural reaction to not. But if we
Yeah.
can teach ourselves to feel whatever we're feeling and just sit with it.
Mhm.
The other thing by avoiding is we lengthen and deepen and strengthen that feeling. It's
Yes.
pouring gasoline on that fire.
Mhm.
Whereas if we just feel it, they really will pass that much quicker.
Yeah. So, in terms of the journaling exercises, which I think is unique, and that's one thing that I've been practicing
Oh, good.
as of late, how did you come up with the idea of journaling, and why do you think journaling is a valuable tool in the healing process?
I have to give credit to actually two editors. One, the first one that recommended it, and I kind of thought about it, but I didn't really do anything about it.
Mhm.
And it was when the second editor suggested it, and because I learned so much writing my own book,
Mhm. Mhm.
that when the second editor suggested it, the other thing was I knew I wanted to write a self-help. Um, I knew it just wasn't about me. You know, the story was bigger than just me, and so many different people could identify with it. Um, so I wanted it to be something that people could get involved in,
Mhm.
and learn from as I was learning writing it and as I learned from my own writing.
I do, since you mentioned that about learning from your own writing. Was that healing for you as well? Just writing it out, writing this book?
Because it forced me to feel feelings that I
Mhm.
otherwise didn't even know I had. I mean, I cried a lot while writing this book.
Mhm.
It wasn't in a bad, I mean, I got so much from it. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't like I wanted to stop writing because I was just getting so much from it.
Mhm. So you discuss the struggles with the family dynamics and financial hardships. So what advice would you give someone going through similar struggles on top of the health challenges?
Well, you're being very polite in not mentioning the fact that there are many addictions in my family. Um, and people use either drugs or alcohol because they don't want to feel their feelings.
Yeah.
They want to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And so suddenly I dropped this bomb on
Mm-hmm.
on the family that forced them to feel. And they didn't have the tools to cope with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so they all got together and blamed me for how they felt, and basically distanced themselves
Mm-hmm.
from me and still have remained distant from myself, unfortunately. My mother has since died, as my father. But
My
that was the only
condolences.
way, I beg thanks. That was the only way they knew how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think, and to answer your question, is to realize that people don't plan on treating, I don't think people plan. Maybe some people do. I don't think the majority of people plan on being rotten to us. I
Right.
think it's due to their lack of ability to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is another place where just dropping into your heart and viewing our family, or is that what you said, how to deal with family like that? Um,
Mm-hmm.
through that lens, through the lens of love rather than anger. And
Mm-hmm.
don't feel shamed that you feel anger, or if your anger happens to come out, because that's a perfectly normal thing too. And boy,
Yeah.
did my anger come out in the beginning. Um, part of one of the symptoms of having the brain tumor was it gave me a temper, which was so embarrassing and so upsetting. Um, but I just think, again, just looking through the lens of love and trying to understand where
Mm-hmm.
people are coming from and recognizing, I think most people really are doing their best.
Right. That's interesting that you said that about the brain tumor, affecting your temper the way it did. How do you think that you conjured up the strength to even overcome that so that you could, let the love shine through?
There was no way I could possibly live being so out of control. That was the worst part of having the brain tumor, was to suddenly have no control.
Hmm.
I did realize the only I didn't go up to people on the street and start yelling at them. It wasn't that
Hmm.
kind of temper.
Right.
You had to really, really, really push me.
Hmm.
And so the majority of people in my life never saw my temper. But
Yeah.
my boyfriend and my mother, who both had drug problems, so
Mhm.
their lives were out of control. So they were getting control by controlling me, by
Okay.
pushing me
Hmm.
until my temper went, and then I'd feel horrible and apologize to them. But once I caught on to what was going on,
Hmm.
but it was so sad and it was just so horrible. But to answer
Yeah.
your question, there was no way I was going to live being that out of control. That took, I mean, I was determined I was going to overcome that. And I don't know if you ever read, hopefully I'm pronouncing this name right, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Did you ever read that book?
No, I don't.
I
I don't think
highly,
so.
highly recommend it. He was a prisoner in a concentration camp, and he realized that the one thing that the Germans could not take from the prisoners were their thoughts. And
Yeah.
those people that were thinking positively, those
Hmm.
people that were appreciating that one little pea that was in their soup, or
Hmm.
hearing a bird sing outside, the walls,
Hmm.
were the people who actually literally lived longer.
Wow, that's
And,
amazing.
and I thought if they can do that under those circumstances, I can start appreciating hearing birds sing, or
Hmm.
appreciating, my appreciation. I use appreciation to help me overcome that. And
That's awesome.
there's a quote,
Mhm.
and I wish I could say it, but it's a famous quote from his book in which he talks about a pause, just to stop for a moment. And
Mhm.
I used that pause that he spoke about before responding to anybody,
That's
just
amazing.
a moment to myself. Yeah.
That is definitely amazing. So, what were some of the most surprising things you discovered about yourself while writing I Chose Love?
I discovered about myself is that I did have strength within myself.
Hmm.
I was pretty lost. I mean, I was diagnosed at age 33, and I thought I was pretty cool and I had things together.
Hmm.
But I was pretty lost. I was searching. I was really searching. And this really helped me understand myself, have far more confidence than I've ever had,
Hmm.
to listen to compliments that people give me,
Hmm.
to really hear them and to take them in, um, to understand people better, to accept people better, far more than I ever did. It,
Hmm.
it really has been. Yes, it helped me stay alive after five doctors told me I was going to die and overcome breast cancer, but it really has helped me understand myself and the world far better.
Hmm. Okay, you've also created a guide, well, obviously a guide to help those battling illnesses and trauma as well as for their caregivers. So, what message do you hope caregivers in particular will take away from your book?
That they take care of themselves first. So many caregivers give, 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 give. But the best caregivers know how important it is to give to themselves, to take care of themselves so that they can give that much more. And I shouldn't say so that, and so that they can give so much more to their clients.
Mhm.
It's the same idea as the what the flight attendants tell us um, when if there's an emergency to give yourself the oxygen first, or you're not going to be able to help that child sitting next to you. It's
Mhm.
so important, and that's just not for caregivers, but in particular caregivers, yes.
No, absolutely. And that's one thing, like I was telling you earlier before, prior to us getting started with the interview, that's one thing I am learning to do specifically for myself, especially still having a young child. But I think that, you know, growing up in my day, for instance, you are, taught by what you see that, okay, take care of everyone else first.
Yes.
then take care of yourself. But, and that's not always good because sometimes when it catches up to you, it's too late. Some people, like, the mind is so fragile. Some people, your mental health breaks down, not just your physical health, and before you know it, it's too late when you're looking up. I've known people who've given and given and given their all until they've just passed away
Yes. Yes.
without ever having gotten back to self-care, and I don't want to do that. So I am I am learning to get
Yay.
back to self-care.
Yay.
I'm trying baby steps,
Yay. I had a
baby
brain tumor
steps.
and and then got radiation damage in which I was
Mhm,
sicker than I've ever been. And to
mhm,
show how I was raised, when I started taking care of myself and learning how to strengthen myself to overcome the radiation damage,
mhm,
my mother told me I was being selfish. And I looked at her and I made that pause. I remember I'm pausing
mhm,
and I just said to her, as respectful as I possibly could, I said, that's really interesting because nobody has ever called me selfish in my entire life. In fact, people have told me the opposite, but I
mhm.
really will consider what you just said, Mom. She looked a little scared.
That is so funny. And you said it in the sweetest way possible, and then added mom on the end. Mom.
Have you noticed when you say things as kind as you possibly can, it has that much more power. There's the
It
love
really
again.
does. It really does. I think people receive it more.
They hear
The
it. They hear
delivery. Yes, exactly.
it.
So my next question is, how did you find the courage to face each new challenge that came your way? And what would you say to someone who feels overwhelmed by multiple hardships?
First thing I would say is what you're feeling, accept what you're feeling. You know,
Mhm,
if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't tell yourself, oh, I shouldn't be overwhelming. Well, I'm just making things worse for I mean, I remember thinking like that. And it's just, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling overwhelmed. And to
mhm,
nurture yourself and be good to yourself, not beat yourself up. And then just take it one step at a time.
mhm,
Do what you can do, even just taking baby steps,
mhm.
which is what I did for overcoming the radiation damage, which just kept, one thing after another, after another, after
Right.
another. And yes, it was frustrating. And I
Mhm,
remember feeling ashamed that I was getting so frustrated, or, I mean, it was just until I realized to accept all my feelings and
mhm,
to mother myself in
mhm,
the way that a loving mother would treat me.
mhm,
Like, rather than waiting for other people to be kind and to nurture ourselves, who can nurture ourselves better than ourselves? Particularly when we teach
true.
ourselves how to do that. We know what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, how do you think the lessons in your book apply to those who are not necessarily directly facing illness, but experiencing other forms of trauma or even stress?
Yes, yes, yes. I've read the reviews of my book,
Mhm.
and I believe that we're up to 21 now, and there is only one person who had overcame an illness, was sick.
Mhm.
Everybody else, there was something different. Um, I remember a particular man who was going through a divorce.
Mhm.
And I think it helps anybody under any
Yeah.
circumstances that's struggling with anything because it teaches people how to empower themselves, how to find that strength within, and how to look at the world and others with loving eyes. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a formula to help anybody.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So many readers, like myself, describe your book as inspiring and transformative because it is. So, what does it mean to you to be a source of hope for others?
Uh, I can feel myself getting choked up just by you
Oh.
answering the question, asking the question. So many people helped me that it's really such an honor. It just feels so good to hear that I'm able to do that for others. It feels wonderful because I owe so many people so much. You know, like strangers. I mean, I mean, people would stop me on the street. I mean, after I did a paint. I don't know if you know this. There's a on my website. There's a it's called. I think the word is there's a mural. I painted. I'm an artist, and I painted a mural. Do you know this story? To share people,
No,
to
no.
share with people what I'd gone through, and the mural was up for 30 days, and then I erased it because I wanted to represent, you know, what how life, to make the most from life while it's here, because it's
Mhm.
going to go very quickly, and to appreciate it while we have it. And so, how did I
Okay.
get talking about that? What was I talking about? How did I get talking
How,
about?
how you're a source of hope for others.
Oh, and so people, I'd be walking on the street, or I would just give my credit card when I'd buy something at a store, and they would go, "Sandy Gold, are you the artist?" And I'd say, yeah, and they'd tell me this story. They wouldn't care that there were people waiting in line. I'd be a little embarrassed, but it was just so wonderful. It was in the
Mhm.
letters I have received, the emails I
Yeah.
received. It's really an honor. I believe we were created to help one another.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and the
Hmm.
proof is the volunteers that go and help the babies that are born premature, all they
Hmm.
have to do is hold them and love
Hmm.
those little guys, and
Hmm.
they live longer. I mean,
Yeah,
we really were created to help one another. And
I believe that.
I love
Hmm.
having this opportunity to do that.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
So, looking back at the person you were when you began this journey, how has choosing love changed you moving forward?
For some reason that this song, I don't know if you remember, if your listeners remember the song, "I Am a Woman, Hear Me Roar." Do you remember that?
Yes.
That just tells me I was a lost little soul at age 33.
Hmm.
And yet I feel like I can take anything on at this
Hmm.
point.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean I don't still have my fears. Of course I do. But I just deal with them, and they go away.
Yeah.
I just, think I feel much stronger, much more confident and wiser.
Hmm.
Just wiser.
Yeah. Yeah. You come out like refined gold.
Oh, that's sweet.
I mean, but I that's how I look at challenges. I mean, you go in one way, but you come out on the other end more resilient and more refined.
Yes.
It really does shape you.
Yes, and I'm sure everybody has experienced that to a certain degree. They can relate. Everybody can
Oh,
relate.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, I believe so. So if readers could take away only one lesson from I Chose Love, what would you hope it would be?
To be as authentic as you possibly can, to speak your truth, to just allow yourself to be you, and to
Mhm.
treat yourself in a loving way. And one last other thing is to learn to teach yourselves how to regulate your nervous systems. Because
Mhm.
once you go through a trauma, and every single person is going through a trauma, whether it be developmental trauma or through an illness or
Yes.
whatever, divorce, whatever,
Hmm.
we become hypervigilant and we start responding to everything around us in fear. And
Hmm.
so, and our nervous systems are there to protect us, and yet they're still responding to things that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so it's really important to learn how to regulate your nervous system using breath work. Is very, very helpful so that you can shine through and not this nervous person are
Hmm.
responding to the things that happen. And there's a lot of stress in the world, so that we have a lot to be afraid of,
Yes.
right? Whereas in
Yes.
the old days, when our nervous systems were developed, first developing, there would be a tiger, and that's what we needed to respond to. Whereas today, we're responding to things 10, 20, 30 times a day. So to
Yeah, that's
learn,
true.
and you can Google ways to learn how to regulate. system. It makes a huge difference. It makes a
It
huge,
does.
and
It
therefore
really
you can be your authentic self and speak your truth rather than yelling and screaming.
does.
Here.
That is so true. That is so true. Well, thank you, Sandy. I really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading your book. I do believe that it will resonate with so many people and help and continue to help so many people. But
Great.
before we go, I want everyone to know where they can follow you. I have your website, sandygold.com. Is that correct?
That's Sandy with an I.
Yes, SANDIGOLD dot
That's
com.
correct. And while they're there, people can subscribe to my free newsletter, in which
Okay.
my email address is in that, and I welcome people to ask me questions, and that's what I use my newsletter for, to answer people's questions for them.
And that's amazing. And where can they follow you on Instagram or Facebook?
Yes, yes, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok. Yeah.
Okay. And what is your handle, your profile handle? Is it still at Sandy Gold or
I think Instagram is at Sandy. I think it's at Sandy Gold, or if it may be at Sandy P Gold, because there was another Sandy Gold. And you can just find me on
okay.
Facebook, Sandy Gold Author.
Okay.
TikTok is probably Sandy Gold if they didn't have another Sandy Gold. Otherwise, it's Sandy P Gold.
Okay. And we will definitely include those in the link at the end of the video.
Oh, and the
For
other thing,
everyone.
if people go to Sandy Gold and they purchase my book there as opposed to Amazon, you can buy an autographed copy at no extra cost. I will sign all books that are bought off my website.
Oh, that is awesome. And that's good to know. So thank you for that. And I will definitely also put all of that information in the description box once we get to post edits. But thank you so much, Sandy. This was amazing, and I'm glad to have you.
Thank you so much for the invitation and your wonderful questions.